like, you
Yeah,
can't,
but
I
she's
mean, email,
also
you can
looking for the
attach
most-
stuff. I'm much more
Yeah,
flexible with email.
you can with text, but they can't be as
He's
big for
worked
sure.
for the Federal
You can't
Aviation.
send
No.
like a whole file.
No,
Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the January 14th, 2025 edition of the Comprehensive Plan Task Force. My name is Al LeGros, and I'd like to quickly go around and have everybody introduce themselves for the record, starting with the lady on my left with the orange coat.
Amy Hybel.
George Prince, whoops, sorry.
Nope.
George? Okay.
Dave Brown.
Thought we
Dave
pushed
Brown?
it through.
Kevin Johnson.
Mary Ann Lee.
Phil Taylor.
Brian Hurst.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We have a couple of people, obviously are not here. One is in Jamaica recovering from the flu, which is hopefully a sign of things to come. And we have one of our star people coming in right now, Bob Eaton. So take a chair, Bob. And we're good. At the start, I'd like to just review a couple of things. First of all, our timeline. A couple of dates to keep in mind. First of all, January 22nd, 8 days from now, we will have the latest version of the comprehensive plan uploaded on the website. We will also have copies, hard copies here at the town office and at the Oars and Bailey Island Library, as well as Cundy's Harbor Library for public review. We have an announcement going out dealing with the 22nd of February public hearing, which is going to appear in the Times Record on the 22nd of January. That event is going to occur at 10 o'clock in the morning. And it's an opportunity for people to consider the latest revisions that we've made to the plan, ask questions and so on, in preparation for our vote, which will occur at the March town meeting. It's the 8th or 6th of?
8th.
8th of March. I have in preparation an anchor article that's being prepared. Basically, it's going to announce and describe what I just said, looking at the timeline and focusing on the key events and so on. It's going to be a short article, but just want to make sure everybody's aware in many ways as possible. Okay, moving on. I'd like to ask if there are any comments about the December 10th minutes that were passed out about a week and a half ago electronically. Any comments, questions, issues? Can I have a motion to approve? Okay, all in favor? Okay, I will make a note that we can post those. Okay, so the main focus tonight is really on Part 1 of the comprehensive plan. Yesterday, I should say, we had a good meeting with the select board. We went over the plan. There was a lot of, a good discussion, a lot of comments. There were some suggestions, what I would call, I won't say happy to glad, but editorial type comments. But there were also some things of substance that I would like to bring up to people. First is, for those people that have copies in front of them, on page 63 of the plan, there's a section on land use. And one of the things that, one of the goals that we put in here was, and I'll quote, "assure that the character and scale of new development is appropriate for Harpswell," which is okay. But it also said, under that particular area, require that residential uses fit the character of the community. And this kind of generated a little bit of conversation, because I think people would say, well, does that mean we have to build colonial-style houses with shingles and high-pitched roofs and things like that? And I would just bring people's attention to that, because I would ask, is there a better way that we can, I think the point was that initially we wanted to have something that kind of blended in with the community. But that doesn't mean that if somebody comes in with a plan for a house that looks a little bit different, that should not be means or grounds, if you will, to reject that. So I'm just kind of, I want to throw that out initially to kind of get your thoughts about whether this is a little bit too severe. Maybe we ought to change the wording a little bit, or what are your thoughts?
Was the difficulty with requiring it, or with the definition of fitting the character?
Well, when you look at the strategies and so on, it talks about developed, improved design standards, and it sort of implies not only, I would say, safety issues, but also the way the house looks. I mean, design standards, you know, some people, at least at the meeting that we had, felt, well, maybe we're going a little bit overboard here. Maybe we ought to make sure that people understand that we're not talking about the fact that you can't build a modern style house in Harpswell. Again, I throw that out just as a point initially.
I think it's a statement that's so vague that it doesn't really say much.
Yeah.
But it says a lot, you know what I mean? It's, however you kind of look at it, it reminds me of something that might be in a subdivision.
Yeah, well, it's
As far as
interesting you bring,
standards,
it's
yeah.
interesting you bring that out, because there's a beautiful example, probably a couple hundred yards from your house on Bailey Island. And there's a huge, very modern-looking structure that has been built overlooking, I guess, Water Cove and opposite Route 24. That is obviously not a colonial looking house. So, I mean,
Yeah, and I would suggest the problem isn't so much with the style as the size.
size, okay.
So, I don't know, it's a hard statement, because how do you really define it?
Yeah.
You know, there's a house on 123 that was built last year. It looks like a Pizza Hut. It's, you know the house I'm talking about?
Oh,
It
absolutely.
sits alone in the field, and they built it. I go, what the hell is that? It literally looked like a Pizza Hut or
Really?
some commercial building.
Oh, is that the one going toward, not, going right toward Brunswick?
No, you headed
Oh,
south,
Harpswell.
just before the Baptist church.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, it just, but, they
So-
like it, who's the,
Does anyone think we need to change the wording of this, or?
put some trees up.
So, Al, I didn't hear these words yesterday.
Yep.
But I wrote them down with asterisks, and
Okay.
you actually said them, blend in. When you brought this up a few
Yeah.
minutes ago.
Yeah.
Maybe we could just add that, something that says, should try to blend in, or, I don't know, just a suggestion.
Yeah.
I know up north, like especially if you're on the water, we had a camp up there, and certain types of siding weren't allowed,
Yeah.
certain colors. You had to blend into the landscape.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That was part of the stipulations.
Yep.
Those types.
A lot of subdivisions do it as well.
Yep, the big one in Brunswick, Meadowbrook, they all had standards, the capes or colonials or,
Yeah.
So do you think that's appropriate, that, something that we ought to adhere to here in Harpswell, or do you think we ought to be more flexible?
well, a lot of people like to throw up contemporaries and,
If I could just say something, I think, if I look at the strategies are to develop design standards, simple design standards, so it's something the implementation committee we would expect the implementation committee to work out the details.
Okay, so it's not necessary, in your view, not to really change the wording here?
I think it would constrain the implementation committee. So if we have an implementation committee, we're gonna have exactly the same discussion, and they can work out whether the right term is A or B or C.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I think the problem is the word require. Quite frankly, I think you're right, Marion. This is kind of aspirational. My God, we could write, each one of us, a very different paragraph on what the character of this community, architecturally speaking, is.
Yep.
I remember when they used to build shacks and slather and use motor oil and stuff. That was cool.
yeah, those were the days.
Yeah. So I would just strike require and say encourage, and then let the thing work out. If there is a head of steam to develop standards, and I hope that doesn't happen, but that's a personal opinion. If there's a head of steam in the community to develop standards about how you design new houses, that'll take place and it'll work itself out in the political system. And
Yeah.
we'll see what happens.
Okay.
Just take require out.
How does everybody think about that?
I've just got one thought.
Yeah.
It may not be whether you're talking about a colonial or a modern house as much as you're talking about the scale. So if you move into a neighborhood that has houses of a certain size and you want to build a mega mansion, maybe that's something we should be paying attention to. It doesn't really matter
Yeah,
the design, it's the scale.
the head of Mackerel Cove and Bailey Island's a perfect example of what you're talking about. There was a 16 by 16 cape there, and somehow we did these swamp credits in Topsom, and he literally built on a swamp. And the place does not fit in the neighborhood. You've seen it, haven't you?
Maybe.
It's on Bailey Island, I know.
Yeah.
You don't get, you
Try
don't,
not to go down that way too much.
he doesn't get past Cooks.
Right.
Somebody told me, I think on the, maybe it was the Board of Appeals, that there was an individual that was trying to build a house that was like 10,000 square feet. I don't know if you heard about that.
I have.
And that's the kind of thing you're referring to. I mean,
It is, and the planning board sees people blasting the crud out of town in order to build these mega mansions. And so I think it doesn't matter whether it's all glass or whether it's colonial or, it's really, does it fit the scale of the community? And I don't know how you regulate it, but
Yeah, I don't know.
so I think maybe your suggestion might be better suited here. Encourage residential uses fit the character and scale of the community.
it's
Okay.
nice language, but it's
Yeah.
not gonna do a damn thing,
Well,
really. I
yeah.
mean, it makes you feel good, and that's okay, but
Yeah, okay. Okay, so that was one thing that came out. The next thing that came out actually was prompted by an email that Jane Covey sent. and I think was available to the people at last night's meeting. And a large part of what she was commenting on was the implementation section of the plan. We have this implementation grid, if you will, where we line up all of the recommendations and so on, strategies that we've come up with, and arrayed them in terms of the areas that they pertain to, the time frame that we think they would be applicable, near term, medium, far term, or ongoing, and then a responsible organization. And she brought up a good point, I think, in that how is this really gonna happen? What are we really gonna do here in the town in terms of trying to implement this plan? And I have a couple of thoughts I'd just like to toss out. To me, if, once the plan is approved, the town needs to establish an implementation committee as soon as possible. And those details can be worked out, who's gonna be on it, how big is it gonna be, and so on and so forth. But to me, the implementation committee ought to take a look at this grid that we've established and come up and focus on those things that are near-term or ongoing primarily, and come up with a list of things and say, okay, here are the things that are sort of on the horizon, on the near horizon. And then I would say they would go to the select board for guidance. And the select board has a couple of options. One is, in some cases, they might be able to make a unilateral decision about an action or a program or whatever. But in a lot of cases, they're gonna have to go to the town, they're gonna have to get more data, they're gonna have to look at things more closely. But they have to be involved at some point in the process clearly, fairly early on. And then, those items that can't be easily dealt with have to go to the town, have to be looked at, have to be analyzed, and looked at further. So I see sort of, several steps here, at least three steps that we go through procedurally to make this happen. And I just want to toss that out to see if, what your thoughts are on that. Because I thought Jane brought up some good points here about, this is fine, but, who's going to determine what we do first, and how is that all going to work? So I'm trying to address that particular issue.
Well, this is new because the former comp plan landed on a shelf.
Yeah.
And that was the end of it.
Yeah, and so to take a step away from that, we want to try, at least try to make a little bit of hay here in the last 3.5 years. And
Well, that's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
Whatever we do.
Yes.
Light's not coming back on. I'll talk loud.
There.
I might just reference the resiliency and sustainability and the vulnerability assessment that we did with the town, and how we then came up with a sustainability plan, which is patterned very similar to the implementation part here. It's where you start to prioritize items in various areas, and then you get input from the areas that are involved. For example, I saw a lot of CCs on here, which are going to be the Conservation Commission. And what is our ability, and what do we need? I would think it just becomes more of a planning process. Once you have this plan and you get the committee, and then you sit down and start looking at how things are mentioned here, and contact the committees to get input on how they can help implement this. And some things are going to take money.
Yeah. exactly.
So you
That-
gotta start figuring out how
Yeah.
to, it's,
Yeah.
you know, it's a planning process.
Do you think we need to kind of at least rough out, here's a rough
Yeah,
process that we think would work here?
I think it's helpful. It's
Okay,
helpful
so-
for the town to know
So
that.
maybe that's what we ought to do in the implementation section, we'll try to figure out a way to fit that in and say, here's a potential methodology, if you will, to
You can go to the
make this
selectmen
stuff
and
happen, yeah,
give it to them and see what they think of it,
Yeah.
make changes.
yeah. Does that sound reasonable to everybody, or?
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. How is that different if an implementation, first of all, I thought some sort of committee was set up after the last plan. It was supposed to report annually, and there was one or two reports, and then it sort of filtered. Yeah, it didn't. A question I have is, if a committee is to be set up, and it's not an ad hoc committee now, it's to use a term, a standing committee, probably not accurate in terms of here, but if it is, then it needs some sort of a definition of its role.
Right.
That would be different, in other words, of its responsibility and its authority, however limited. But that's a little different than what you're suggesting, so I see two things.
Yeah.
One, a possible process they might follow, and by the way, I think the critical one is, I would guess 80% of our plan is aspirational and not, it's should as opposed to shall. There's stuff in here that says, we're gonna do it, hell or high water, but not much of it. And so that needs to be filtered out as part of your triage system.
Yeah.
Is what part of this plan have we really said it's gonna happen?
Yeah.
And other parts, well, we encourage, we hope, and we're,
Yeah, right, right.
but the second thing is a charge for the committee. And we might draft such a thing, I think the select board probably has to approve it at the end of the day, but we might draft such a thing. What's its authority?
Yeah. Well, it's, if this is all gonna hang together, it's gonna have to reach out to all the other committees in the community, in the town. It's gonna have to deal closely with the select board and the staff and so on. So it's not something that you look at as just ho-hum, oh, by the way. If this is all gonna work and hang together, if we can hope to make as much progress as we can, this committee's gonna play an important role, potentially. And so, what I hear is that you think we ought to maybe talk a little bit about a process, a little bit more than what's in here right now, and then take a look at, think about the committee responsibilities specifically. Yes, sir.
Al, in a way, the Comprehensive Plan Implementation Committee, to me, has two different roles. And whether they're one body or two bodies, I'm not sure. One body, to me, is to be the process manager, to sort of be the overseer of the implementation and to say, okay, Mary Ann, how are you doing on, this thing that you're supposed to be doing? That's one role. The second role is to actually be a working committee, to work on making sure that the ordinance amendments or the shalls that were over there actually get done. And in a way, they're different roles. I worked with one city in Gardner, and they actually had two different groups. They had sort of a, whatever you want to call it, oversight committee that only met quarterly and then semi-annually, and went through the implementation strategy and said, are we taking care of that? Is, Paul doing what he said he would do in here? And then they also had an ordinance committee that really was responsible for cranking out the shalls that were in there. I just put that out for you to think about.
Okay. Okay, so what I hear is that, in terms of our plan, we're probably gonna need to include some extra sentences about how this might work procedurally, and then something about basically the responsibilities that this committee might have, which is really not really there, you know, in full-fledged manner, so. I'll take that on here. I mean, we have 8 days to get this thing finalized, so I'll work on it. I'll send something out to everybody and get everybody's consent. Sir?
I would say you really have 3 or 4 days to get it done. Because you gotta print stuff and.
Yeah, you're not building in the football, though, on the weekend here. Okay. All right.
If you get it done before the weekend football, then you
All
can
right,
relax.
okay,
and
so
enjoy
we got
football.
the rest of the week. I got the rest of the week, okay. So I'll try to get something put together, and where I would propose to put that is in the implementation section
Yeah.
of this plan to kind of flesh that out a bit more so that it makes a little bit more sense. Okay. Now, the next area that we spent a little bit of time about is our old friend housing. And on page 56 of this plan, in particular, I think, George, you had some specific recommendations about maybe changing or adding some words to the paragraph, last paragraph on page 56, because there was some concern that, well, we're maybe camouflaging, if you will, a little bit, one part of the message here, specifically the part that deals with developing or encouraging attainable housing in the town, talking about cluster homes and duplexes and things like that. So I just want to go back to you to make sure that I understand exactly what you would recommend here.
Well, pretty much you summed it up. We've referred ourselves to another committee here, you know, and it says to see the appendices. People aren't gonna do that.
Yeah,
It's pretty dry reading to start with.
Assuming they got the 56.
And they, exactly, and then if they go to their site, is it easy to find? And I would just like to see it here. Yeah, we took it out because it was controversial and trying to sort of relieve some of the tension, but at the same time, now it kind of looks like we're trying to hide it. So
okay, so,
there's a fine line there, I mean,
yeah.
let's just
Yeah.
somehow put the cards on the table,
Yeah.
I guess is what I'm trying to
Okay.
say. I don't-
All right. Yes, sir.
I have a question, and I think you're right,
We-
we do not want to hide stuff, we want to be very transparent. Following that paragraph, there's a page that says housing action highlights, and then there's 2 pages of goals. Now, does those highlights and those goals pretty much spell out what the affordable housing looking for? Is that, are those making some steps in the direction of being transparent in terms of warning people what they're getting into?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure, but we were asked to take the portion out that says that we won't use, take the portion out that said the housing would be on public land. We took it out of this plan, but we said we're in agreement with the Affordable Housing Group, who is not taking it out. So you see what I'm saying? It's kind of,
yeah.
we kind of passed the buck.
I
it's-
think they haven't taken it out in the sense that
And,
they say it's a possibility
yeah, I
that
mean,
might happen in the
I
future.
understand it. It's just somehow people deserve to know what the plan is, that's all. I guess that's where I'm at.
I'm concerned that, again, we try and get too specific here.
Yeah,
We sabotage the group that's gonna take the next step.
right.
So I think
So-
we ought to be creating sort of the
So maybe we,
idea that
we,
we're concerned about this, but not, here's the steps.
we take out the appendices for the full report, and we, I think, as Bob has pointed out, the goals and strategies that follow kind of articulate what is in the plan. I've been wrestling with this, obviously. Here's my bottom line, and I'll just throw it out. We all understand that housing, not only in Harpswell, but all over, is expensive, and it's difficult, and it's a major issue for a lot of people. The question is, how do we, in this town, take responsible steps to help people as much as we can? And in the report that the Housing Committee put together, they talked about a lot of things that really focus on looking at current structures in the town, big houses that you can split into 2 or 3. Maybe providing opportunities to develop ADUs, encouraging long-term rentals and things like that. Those are all kind of things that are consistent without really changing or impacting a lot of different things in the town. Where it starts to get a little bit dicey is if you talk about, well, do we want to build developments that have cluster homes or duplexes or so on and so forth? And my perspective is that maybe that's not going to happen in Harpswell, but at least we ought to have the possibility through ordinances or through other means to allow that to happen under very strict circumstances. There has to be enough water, there has to be septic, all that stuff has to be worked out. It has to be buffered, it has to be something that fits as much as possible into the community. And when you start looking at all those types of things, there's not going to be a lot of stuff that you're going to be able to do here. Most of it is going to have to be in the interior zone, too. All of it is going to basically be in the interior zone. So I guess what I want to do is keep the possibility for something like that, but not necessarily saying, yeah, we're going to do it. Yes, sir.
Al, I'm going to take exception to your characterization, because in the basic land use ordinance, there currently is a workforce housing provision.
Right.
That allows affordable housing at a density of 20,000 square feet per unit as part of a clustered development. I would argue professionally it's never been used, because if anybody can figure out how you apply it, it's a disaster. What the plan says is to revise that concept of allowing a subdivision that would provide attainable housing, even housing that's for higher incomes than affordable, make it workable, and allow smaller lot area for smaller units. The idea that this is something new, that the town has never done this, is not true.
I'm going to take issue with that. I'm sorry, Mark, and I don't want to get into an argument. The things that are proposed in the Affordable Housing Report are vastly different than what you're talking about. They're not the same as what's in
Well,
the
no,
workforce housing.
no.
It's different.
Well, yes, in terms of intensity, but the fact that there already is provisions in the ordinance that allowed income-restricted housing on 20,000 square foot lots, that allows workforce housing on 20,000 square foot lots, three-bedroom homes, what have you, that's not a new concept.
No, it's not a new concept, but what is a new concept is to allow housing developments on 8,000 square foot lots.
I agree.
And so
completely.
it is very different, and honestly, I'm weary of this. I'm not going to continue to argue about it. I feel it's not worth it. Let's just let it go. We'll see what happens.
Okay, what I want to make sure is, yeah, I agree with you, we've batted this around for a long time. What I want to make sure in terms of this plan, and the reason I brought it up is the people feel comfortable as they can with the way this plan presents our look into the future regarding housing.
I will say I don't,
Okay,
and I already said that.
Yep.
I'm not going to reiterate it,
okay,
and I don't.
okay. Sir?
So I guess I want to, I think George made some really good comments the other day, and they were supported by other folks, about making sure that it's clear that the relationship with the Affordable Housing Task Force report is much clearer, and I think that that makes sense to do. So that I agree that people aren't, there's gonna be a lot of people that aren't gonna go all the way through, get to page 63 or whatever, and say, oh, I better look up this other document.
Yep.
But the people who are interested in housing are gonna open it up, where's the housing section, and take a look at that. So in that area, we should make it clear. Or maybe we put like affordable, the relationship to Affordable Housing Task Force in, larger font, make it its own section, and put that paragraph in.
Possibly a link where
Yeah.
you could type it in and it takes you right there.
Yeah, like a
Especially for the online version, a blue link where you just click it and boom,
hyperlink,
you're right there.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
Would be great.
Okay, I don't wanna
And then you could just write the text here. You'd
poke
have
the
to
bear any more than that, but I
type
just
it
wanna,
in if you wanted to go.
I just wanna reiterate the fact that we had a lot of conversation about this yesterday at the select board meeting. I just wanted to kind of make sure that, we feel as though in terms of this plan, we've done the best we possibly can to blend both, all of the perspectives, if you will, all of the input, all of the viewpoints in the town. That's really what I'm trying to get at. Okay. All right. I would like to turn it over to people who were at the meeting yesterday. There were about 5 or 6 people that were at the select board meeting. Do you recall anything, or would you like to bring up anything that you think you want to share with the entire task force at this point? Okay?
Just one quick thing, I heard Peter say something before the meeting, and I've been saying it right along, and I agree. No comprehensive plan is gonna be perfect, and nobody's gonna,
Right,
not one person's gonna read this and go, wow, this is fantastic.
right. Yeah,
No, nobody's gonna do that, so
okay. Yeah, I think
let's
we've,
not-
hopefully we reach the
yeah,
85 percentile threshold that it, hopefully we're,
perfect,
to the point where
perfect is the
people can
enemy of
live
good
with it.
enough.
We're not gonna do the perfect plan,
Al?
exactly, it's just not
Yes,
gonna
ma'am.
happen, so, hopefully.
not this year.
I think
Hopefully
I would
people
like to
work
say
with it.
something similar to what I said yesterday. When I read the new plan that came out, I was really impressed with how it flowed compared to what we had before. How we have now made ourselves a working waterfront community since this plan first started, how we picked up on that, and we walked it through, all the steps. And, as I said yesterday too, we have this housing piece, which is kind of a hot-button topic, but it ties in so much to what we're trying to do in town with the fishing community. So I just want to congratulate you on that for,
Yeah, it's
pulling
much
that
much
together.
simplified, it's
Yeah.
much better than the first one.
Okay. Well, and we're not gonna spend a whole lot of time here tonight, but, part two of this plan, which is really the background information, the history, graphs, charts, data, and so on, I expect to see very soon. And we're going to pencil whip this thing one more time in the next few days to make sure that everybody's comments are addressed as best we can. Get it on the website on the 22nd of January. Have copies available for the public to look at. And then I think the next thing we need to do is look at a period of time in early February to set up some, what I call drop-in sessions. In other words, if a couple of us can be available for a few hours, 1 or 2 hours in the afternoon on, in early February, for people to come in. Maybe maybe no one will show up. Maybe 10 people will show up, I don't know. But at least we provide opportunities for them to come in if they have any questions or issues before February 22nd. I'm looking at that as the mother of all presentations. I'm going to dip into my military career as best I can to come up with something that I hope will both answer questions and encourage discussion and dialogue, but mostly to clarify and encourage, people to support this, and more on that to follow.
Al,
Sir?
you and I have to change our thinking. The deadline for the ad is January 21st, and the public hearing is February 22nd.
Okay, the ad, you mean the Times Record ad?
Yeah, and the
Okay.
materials being ready and what have you, and you and I keep saying January 22nd. And
Okay,
it's that Tuesday that the Times Record publishes.
okay. So there will be an announcement in the Times Record, which only publishes like twice a week now, I guess.
Yeah.
Right.
Does anybody here read it?
I'll look at it briefly as I go out of Shaw's, but that's about it.
I pick up a copy of Start Fires with Fire.
But anyway, we are required, if you will, to announce our public hearing and in the Times Record, and that's gonna happen on the 21st of January. And it's gonna say, we're gonna have a meeting on the 22nd of February, that these reports are gonna be online. The report's gonna be online, it's gonna be available for the public to look at. That's basically what it's gonna say. Sir?
You asked about reflections on yesterday's meeting. I made it's a small issue, but I think very important. I made a small margin note. At one point during that session, somebody said, well, which vision are you looking at? And there was this back and forth. And it didn't really get resolved. When you're ready to drop this on the 22nd, I hope that the footer will be changed to it. You could decrease, you could add, needs, something in the footer of every page has to say, this is the final draft. So if somebody says in the public meeting or any other meeting, wait, what draft? I downloaded something, what is, you can say, look in your footer. If it says this, you've got the right one. So find out what the terminology you want to use. This is the final draft, this is the, thing. But just to make sure that we don't get into a funny game of people talking about, well, my page 56 is your page 48.
All right. Okay. Good. All right, one other thing. Technically, we have a meeting scheduled in 2 weeks, which is the 28th of January. My preference is to have a meeting at that time, only if it's absolutely necessary. In other words, most of the work that we're talking about here should have been done by that point. And so it may be on the town calendar at this point in time, but if things look like they've laid out, like I think they will, then we're probably not gonna have a meeting on the 28th, I think it's some date like that. I'm sure that people are gonna cry in their beer about that, but, whatever.
I suppose you dangling in the sand in Florida that day.
Okay. All right, so stay tuned, we'll send out an email, or, we'll send out an email to confirm that, but chances are we probably won't have a meeting.
So I still have this question about, what's gonna happen at our February 22nd meeting if, one or several people, are extremely opposed to something in the final draft. And it may only be some recommendations or something like that, or a goal.
So I know, I'll let Kevin answer that.
Too late.
Too late?
Yeah,
How many
basically,
meetings?
the feeling is, okay, you're gonna have a vote in March.
Yeah,
If you really have objections to this and you don't like it, then you vote no.
okay, yeah.
And then we'll leave it up to the town and what they wanna do after that. But
I mean, I suspect
it's an
that-
up or down, yea or nay vote.
Yeah, and I suspect it'll pass, even if a few people really disagree with something. And maybe there's a way they could pursue their issue.
Yeah.
Well, they can speak to it, but, you know, they can speak to it at town meeting.
Is it gonna be show of hands or on the ballot?
No, show of hands.
Show of hands.
It's on the
It's on
floor.
the floor.
Anything big this year is on the floor. Library's on the ballot.
Only hit us with one at a time, please.
What's that?
Only hit us with one big one at a time.
Yeah, I know.
I think it's of a piece with, it's not gonna be the perfect plan, and it's not gonna be unanimous support.
No, that's what George and
But we
Peter
need
both
to
said.
have a majority.
Yeah. Yeah, if it was unanimous, I'd be
Something's wrong.
totally stunned, yeah. But I think we gave it a good shot. We did the best we could. We're gonna make some final tweaks to make it as best as we can and let the chips fall where they may. I wanna thank everybody for everything that you guys have done. It's been a long slog. We've had some interesting conversations and debates and discussion, and I've learned a lot personally, and I think that hopefully we can put something forward that the town will make use of in the future. So, any other comments, sir?
Al, this is really sort of just informational. Where are we on part two?
I gave comments, I'll tell you where we are on part two. I gave comments to our.
Because part two has to be part of what's.
Yes, I gave my final comments to part two over a week ago. And I said, basically, there were a couple of things that I was trying to get updates on. One was mooring data, and the other one was on EMS data for 23 and 24, which I thought we were gonna be able to close very quickly. Neither one of them has materialized. So, as far as I'm concerned, I've gone through part two, made my comments, and as far as I'm concerned, without lacking that data, we go.
You can get EMS data on Thursday if you want it. There's been a study being presented Thursday.
Mooring,
No,
the
EMS.
EMS data?
Yeah,
Oh, okay,
yeah.
all right. Thursday, is it gonna be Selectmen's meeting?
Yep.
Okay, good. So we'll have it by the end of the week. How's that?
Do I need jingle
Yes.
duty to make sure?
Yeah, jingle it. That's a good way to, yeah, absolutely. Because I've submitted my comments, and I was only waiting for a couple of data points to do it the best I possibly could to kind of update what I thought was possible. You know, since all those things were kind of in-house type information. Aside from that, as far as I'm concerned, we're done. Anything else? Sir?
I'd like to thank Mark Iverman. I'm pretty sure we wouldn't have got this done without him, for coming out of retirement and your help. I know we didn't exactly see eye to eye when I first started on this committee, but your help certainly
Okay.
is appreciated by me, Mark.
When this process started, he was 6 feet tall.
Really?
We've kind of whittled him down a little bit. Okay, anything else? Thanks, everybody. Stay safe, and we'll talk to you soon. Meeting's adjourned.
Yes.
All right.
You go home now, fold the blankets over your head and just cry. Not a bad thing, every once in a while, it feels kind of good. Yeah, it does. Like you got a jug in there.
I'm sorry. I have to.
Getting there.